Hello and welcome to the Software AG Web Methods tutorial series. Today we'll be learning how to create a user interface with the Web Methods Composite Application Framework tool. If you would like to follow along with this tutorial, you have two choices. If you already have a Web Methods environment of your own that includes the My Web Methods server, the integration server, and the designer tool, you can apply these concepts in any way you'd like. Otherwise, you can use the pre-built tutorial environment to follow the written steps exactly. If you don't have access to the tutorial or the instructions, please contact your local regional sales manager or email us at webinfo@softwareag.com. In order for all of the steps in the tutorial to work, you will need to ensure that the following server components are running. You can use the Windows Services console for this. Today's example will be based on a common scenario, building a UI that will interact with a web service. So we'll create a portlet inside of a portlet project, we'll create a web service connector, and finally we'll test our portlet in the My Web Methods server. So let's get started. First, we'll need to start Designer. Designer is the unified development tool for the Web Methods platform. With Designer, you can create process models, do service development, as well as user interface development. Because Designer is based on Eclipse, it utilizes the perspectives to be able to tailor your interface for the job at hand. So we'll need to change to the UI development perspective. In the Web Methods suite, individual user interface components are called portlets. Collections of portlets that work together are called a portlet application. Let's create a portlet application to display some information about employees. We'll name our portlet application project Employee and click the Finish button. User interfaces of the suite are based off of the Java Server Faces standard, and Designer is now creating all of the standard-specific deployment descriptors. Now that we have an application project, let's create a portlet which will display some information to the user. Designer contains lots of different portlet types that allow you to create user interfaces based on templates. Today we're going to stick with the generic portlet type. The next step is to give your portlet a name. We'll call our portlet Employee List. You can also put a space in the title to give it a more human-readable format. One of the advantages of using Designer is that it takes care of all of the JSF details for you. Notice that a default view has been created. The palette contains an organized list of all of the UI components like drop-down boxes and text boxes. Our portlet will call a web service that will return a list of employees and display them on the screen. So we'll need to browse the ESB and select a web service that we'll call. Connecting the web service to the portlet is easy. Just drag and drop it onto the canvas. One of the components that was created for you by default in your view is the form. Make sure you place your web service inside of the form. Another advantage to Designer is that it hides the complexities of the web service. After automatically introspecting the WSDL, Designer will present a wizard which will let you select the operation that you'd like to perform against this web service. Another advantage that Designer gives you is the ability to speed development by converting that WSDL into a basic user interface. In Designer, you can double-click on any tab to maximize its view. Let's take a closer look at what Designer has created for us. We have our input parameter, as well as the output results displayed as a table. Designer even adds elements such as pagination and a refresh button to execute the web service. Now let's take a look at some of the non-UI components that were created. In the Bindings tab, there's a section called Managed Beans. Here you can browse the Java objects that were created. GetEmployees is the server-side Java object which encapsulates the connection to the ESB web service. With the Bindings tab, you can inspect these Java objects to view things like the input parameters, as well as the output results. Let's look back at the canvas. For each of the UI components on the canvas, there are a set of properties which define things like behavior and appearance. For example, you use the value property to bind your server-side variable to your UI control. Designer ships with hundreds of controls that you can use to build your user interfaces and portlets. For example, you can drag and drop date pickers, swap boxes, and other inputs to easily and quickly create AJAX-enabled browser applications for your users. Now that we have a UI tied to an ESB web service, let's take a look at it at runtime. When you're editing view files, there's an icon at the top of the canvas which lets you execute your portlet on the My Web Methods server. We'll use the System Administrator account to execute this portlet. The WSDL for our web service required a country to be specified as part of the input parameters. By default, the wizard automatically binds the refresh button to the method on the portlet which calls the ESB. And here we see the results of our web service call. This completes our tutorial. Software AG's Composite application framework technology makes it easy and fast to create robust user interfaces. Native web service and AJAX support are just a few of the many reasons why our customers choose us. Thanks for listening.